Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
The Institute of Space Commerce is a nonprofit think tank headquartered in Austin, Texas, focused on expanding and enhancing the economic and commercial dimensions of the space industry, what many call Space 2.0. It operates as an intellectual hub for policy, research, and global dialogue. The Institute offers fellowships and scholarships to nurture the next generation of space economic leaders, space cafe events, global educational gatherings on cutting-edge industry topics, research publications, including essays, white papers, and books, media contributions and outreach campaigns, including advocacy such as Save Our Station for the ISS. My guest on this edition of the Journal of Space Commerce podcast is Michael Potter, one of the co-founders of the Institute of Space Commerce. Michael, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Tom. Real pleasure to be on.
Let's just kind of start from the very beginning and talk about what inspired the founding of the Institute of Space Commerce.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. You know, all of us have our kind of personal journeys of how we got to space. I grew up in Southern California, and everybody in my neighborhood were engineers, either working directly on the Apollo program or working on the engineering and design related to dealing with the Cold War. So everything from radars to missiles to radios, satellites, GPS. Those were all the folks in my neighborhood. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized that was a super special place. Most kids didn't have that introduction. Both the co-founders, Chris Stott and myself, we looked around the landscape, and there were a lot of institutes mostly dealing with space policy. There's an institute of space law, but there didn't seem to be an institute that was trying to focus on space commerce, and really not so much a regulatory or policy-led institute, but institute that's really interested in customers, interested in demand pull, and interested in kind of business, capitalism, and economics being able to solve problems rather than government regulation.
So kind of as an outgrowth of the fact that space is becoming more and more commercial. I mean, it used to be all NASA, all government. Now there are so many large and small companies that are involved in space. It seemed like it was something that was almost a natural outgrowth of that.
Yeah, and I think that exactly, it is a natural outgrowth. And if you look at one of the most successful industries on the planet, it's satellite telecommunications. And at one point in the early industry, that was all 100% monopolies, controlled by governments and controlled by monopoly consortiums. And, you know, it was a pivotal time when that industry started to get pressure from the real commercial players. And, you know, one of the early pioneers was Inmarsat. And, you know, basically it was illegal. It was illegal for people to try to break that monopoly. And so we had to go through a process, and you know, members of the Institute of Space Commerce, you know, we many of the key members have decades and decades of experience in commercialization, in, you know, law, policy, regulation. And we had to break the back of the Eutelsat monopoly, which was 100% monopoly, Eutelsat, which was a monopoly, Inmarsat was a monopoly. And then you see the emergence, and now we have this very, you know, kind of vital ecosystem, everything including Starlink to remote sensing to other aspects of satellite communication. So that is a normal process. It starts kind of in kind of a government monopoly entity, and then it gets spun off where it becomes a powerful ecosystem.
So then how does the Institute define space commerce and its future?
Yeah, so for us, it's really about celebrating and accelerating space commerce, and that involves the you know, people making money, making profit related to space, both on the ground and the operations in space. all money made related to space ends up on Earth anyways at the moment. And, that's kind of phase one, phase one of this progression to becoming a multiplanetary species. And and then there's a dark side to that, right? I mean, so just this week, the Europeans have announced plans to build a competitor to Starlink. And
Right.
so when you hear about that, the first thing that one probably thinks about is that sounds like industrial policy. That sounds like a jobs program. And the worst part of it is that they're going to invite other European countries. So that includes places like the Ukraine, all these other places. It's going to go out to the European Space Agency partners. And that's really about a jobs program. It's about, it's industrial policy. It's duplicating space assets, and it's kind of anti-competitive in its vision. And, so I think that's really disturbing. It's almost kind of a Soviet style communism in terms of, yes, let's push this down the throats of people. Now, of course, the incentive for countries to come on board is not the economics, the economics related to space and customers. The incentive is that it's a jobs program. So if you want to play, you got to pay to play, and then you get to do duplicate space assets that are being driven by governments, not by industry.
It's almost reminiscent of what the Europeans did with Airbus to try to compete with Boeing.
Exactly. So this is subsidies and industrial policy and jobs programs, and it's completely disconnected from kind of reality. And the thing that I hope is that doesn't count for the 5% that the NATO partners have just signed up for defense spending. I want that money to go for boots on the ground, that 5%, not for duplicate, space assets that are just about creating jobs in industry.
So, Michael, walk us through the core mission and goals for the Institute.
Yeah, so thanks for the kind introduction at the beginning. And so there are a few aspects of the Institute, but a big part of it is our fellows and the publications and the media outreach that some of the key players at the Institute generate. And that's really trying to increase the debate on these subjects that we're talking about. So that's one of the things that we often see in Washington, D.C., is that there's this kind of inside the beltway, which is kind of scarcity mentality where people are fighting over limited government budgets, but really trying to increase the debate and widen the debate about, kind of what does it take to get to a more robust space economy situation? How do we accelerate space business? And I think that, this kind of core vision about humanity becoming a multiplanetary species, what does that look like from a business point of view, and what does it look like from an economics point of view? And that's, again, that would be my criticism of this kind of duplication of Starlink, trying to create jobs and trying to keep industry. How does that relate to humanity becoming a multiplanetary species? It doesn't. And that's where a lot of countries get lost, when these big space agencies have these 30 or 40-page strategic plans that they try to outline. And it includes, books to kindergartners, it includes videos for, young children. It has all these things in 40 or 50 pages, but almost none of these plans that I know of. And I've looked at the Chinese strategic plan, the Russian strategic plan, the European strategic plan, the United States strategic plan. Almost nobody talks about humanity as a multiplanetary species. That's where it starts with, not about all these other distracting things that these agencies have a very difficult time carrying out.
You keep talking about the European competitor, if you will, to Starlink, and it occurs to me that oftentimes, if they try to force that down people's throats and Starlink has a better product, it's going to be available there too. And that, unless they take steps to block Starlink from the countries where their system is available. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, so the stereotype And it's a kind of a disturbing stereotype. But the stereotype is that America innovates and Europe regulates. And so you see that with Google, you see that with Twitter, you see that with Facebook, you see that with Apple. So these are, and billions of dollars of fines to punish these innovative companies. And and I think that, it will be in Europe's best interest to try to engineer their way out so that they can become innovators and they can become disruptors and they can start to walk away from this kind of hyper focus on regulation. But you can see it in the AI policy.
Sure.
So Europe's already started to regulate AI. The United States just came out with the new AI strategic plan. And it's, already, Europe's talking about, safety, want to regulate it. The United States is talking about how to innovate it. But, and if you look at AI as an example, you got to start with going back to the original space race, which was about, pitting Soviet-style communism against free market Western democracies. And fortunately, the Soviets lost that race. But if you look at the AI geopolitical competition, which is very, very similar to the competition we saw with the original race to space, there's this race for superintelligence, the geopolitical race for superintelligence. And, one of the scary thoughts is that if if it is believed that an adversary may have a breakout and get to superintelligence before another country, should that other country consider doing a preemptive strike of the data centers to take out the superintelligence before it gets there, right? So it's kind of a scary concept. So Europe just yesterday announced that they now want to be in the race, the geopolitical race for superintelligence. Well, it's too little, too late, and I don't know how you reconcile that with the tighter hyper-regulatory framework that they think about. So, and again, this relates to space. It's kind of the other side of the coin related to the subjects that we think about with space.
It sounds like you just almost outlined a plot of what would have been a Tom Clancy novel.
I interviewed Tom Clancy once for my first documentary film on space, which was Orphans of Apollo, which profiled the entrepreneurial activity by a group of American entrepreneurs to commercialize the Russian Mir space station. Of course, the Mir space station was developed as part of the Soviet competition with the Americans. Mm-hmm. But when the wall came down and Russia became the Wild West, you could buy anything, including the Mir space station in outer space. And I had the privilege of interviewing Tom Clancy for that documentary.
Let's get back to the matter at hand. Although I could talk with you about things like that for an afternoon, I think. Michael, what kinds of research does the Institute publish, and how is that used in shaping policy?
Yeah, so a lot of so like I said, we have decades and decades of experience with all the key participants of the Institute of Space Commerce. And we have been publishing papers that have been presented at conferences around the world. Oftentimes we have presented at the International Institute of Space Law, or we've presented at the International Astronautical Congress or other conferences around the world. And generally, we try to provide frameworks for people to think about space issues a little bit differently. So one of the papers that we published was on creative approaches to financing space technology and space science. So, we have these kind of traditional ways of thinking about things. Many space agencies kind of want to be in the design, build, operate mode. Mm. And there's a lot of other models, for pursuing that. And so those are the things that we encourage. Jared Isaacson, who sadly did not get appointed as NASA administrator, has recently come out saying that as a private individual, he'd like to contribute to space science. So there are a lot of people out there, high net worth individuals and others, that are interested in putting money to make discoveries in science. And that's just another way to kind of, break the old model that everything has to be done through space agencies. And there's a lot of weaknesses with the space agency model. I mean, it's a lot like the, kind of the science community when it comes to grants, where it's kind of like a groupthink. If you look at the mRNA, the scientific consensus was that mRNA was a waste of time. And
Right.
It turned into a Nobel Prize. It created vaccines which solved the global pandemic problem. The problem with a lot of the, and historically NASA, but I'd say all space agencies, is that data is king. And previously there was a reluctance to share that data. So you get someone doing a PhD, and they would do an experiment, and they work on it for 8 years. They'd publish their PhD. For them, the goal was their PhD. But the data is super, super important, and opening up that data. So I think a big aspect for me of Space 2.0 is also open source, trying to be as open source about technology, open source about data, open source about software. That's where the innovations, and even citizen science. I mean, that's also very much a Space 2.0 concept, and has a lot of tremendous amount of capability. I mean, if you look at trying to identify Earth killer asteroids, there's always been these big plans by NASA, and I have to tell you, I mean, one of the big mistakes of NASA, and I think that they could get better. Oftentimes there'll be somebody, an amateur, maybe a medical doctor that also has a hobby in astronomy. They'll discover an asteroid that might be an Earth killer, and
Right.
and NASA will say, "Oh, relax, everything's under control." NASA didn't find it. The guy found it, like, on Christmas Eve, and NASA's saying, "Relax." I mean, this is an opportunity for NASA to say, "Hey, we need more funding to go into those sort of things." But the flip side is, from NASA's point of view, there's an internal bureaucratic urge to create billion-dollar missions. Well, lately, most of these these dangerous asteroids have been found by AI. Going through old data and using AI are making the breakthroughs that some, billion-dollar future program that's going to be delayed, over budget and delayed. And we have the tools there. We just have to go through it with AI.
You sound a bit skeptical, Michael.
Well, I've seen it come down, right? Because there have been private initiatives, even nonprofit initiatives, to to try to protect the Earth from incoming asteroids, and NASA views that as competition.
Hmm.
Jay Honeycutt, who was one of the fantastic visionary leaders of the Kennedy Space Flight Center, there's always a little rivalry between the various centers at NASA, which, is part of the weakness of the structure. Great for getting
Right.
congressional buy-in, great for jobs, but not really great for executing. And so sometimes it's a friendly rivalry, sometimes it's not so friendly. But Jay once quipped, "It cost $1 billion to turn on the lights at Caltech and JPL," and so naturally it's cost $1 billion. So you got to create a lot of programs to pay for that $1 billion of overhead, even if it's redundant, even if it's going to compete with other institutions, even if it's not the most efficient.
What's the story behind Stephen Hawking's Lifetime Achievement Award and its connection to the International Space Station?
Well, first of all, he was a remarkable human being. The Institute of Space Commerce is an affiliate of the International Space University. And so together, the boards had agreed that he really needed to be acknowledged for his great work in space. And so the Institute of Space Commerce became the lead in organizing a tribute on this space station for Stephen Hawking, and a video was made, and certificates were delivered. But it was, and those are the sort of things that the Institute of Space Commerce, I think, is very good at, but we also enjoy doing, which is trying to identify those that either have had a unique contribution to space, something that should be acknowledged. And Hawkins was a unique one, and I think he was a great proponent of space. Also, many people probably don't realize, but he actually participated in a zero gravity flight. And
Hmm.
for people who are not physically fully able, zero gravity has a lot of potential benefits, and those are some exciting opportunities for future explorers.
My guest is Michael Potter, one of the co-founders of the Institute of Space Commerce on the Journal of Space Commerce podcast. Take a moment right now to click subscribe to be sure you don't miss any of our podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Xterra Media. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional, an investor, or an enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit www.xterrajsc.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and, when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. Michael, in the introduction, I mentioned the Save Our Station campaign. Tell me about its goals and the impact.
Yeah, well, I mean, and thanks for highlighting that, because that's something that the team is super passionate about, and that hasn't come out of anywhere. When the Russians were getting ready to crash the Mir space station, there was also a similar movement, which was Save the Mir. And that was done with, Mir Corp, which wanted to turn that into a private hotel, a private research facility. Now, sadly, that program got hit by the dot-com collapse, and so we weren't able to see, the full potential of what that campaign could have done.
Right.
The International Space Station is the most expensive structure ever built by humanity, $200 billion. It's an extraordinary facility when you put it in that context. And the current plan is for NASA and its partners to crash this into the ocean. So this $200 billion asset, which is constantly being renovated, new solar panels, and it's constantly being renovated, and there's still another $1 billion more of renovations before they get ready to crash it. And it'll cost $1 billion to crash it into the ocean. Our proposal is as a way to honor it, not only in a kind of cultural context, but also we believe from a science point of view. We think that future space explorers may have the opportunity to visit it, but we think it could be turned into the world's greatest museum, a cultural museum, a creative outpost for envoys, artists and creative envoys for all of humankind. So the plan would be to depressurize it. And if people had an idea that, we'll keep it pressurized and put it in a higher orbit, so kind of a storage orbit, that actually would be a very, very difficult thing and be very costly. So by depressurizing it, we think we could more safely locate it to a higher orbit and hopefully preserve it for all humankind. But also, you have 1 million pounds of metal and other things up there, and it's hard. Historically, it's been very expensive to get things to space. So at minimum, maybe that could be repurposed or reused. But just as a cultural artifact, we think we ought to consider saving it. And this is the time to be in the discussion, because a lot of the advisory groups for NASA in Washington, D.C. are reviewing this, and the options that many of these advisory committees are given don't include putting it up into a higher storage orbit. So I think it's important just to expand the debate and have a vigorous discussion about it. And, it's complicated. It was created by international treaty law. There are many partners. You'd have to get some consensus on that. And then you'd have to mount a mission. Either way, you're going to have to mount a mission to deorbit it. But flip side, you'd have to also mount a mission to reorbit it.
It seems like, I'm thinking that the space station was first conceptualized back when NASA had a completely throwaway mindset. Build it once, fly it once, and then either crash it into the ocean or put it in a museum. And maybe there's some of that mindset that's going into this. When we built it to be thrown away anyway, that was before SpaceX came along and made reusability such a real reality for the space industry.
Yeah, and now NASA is relying on the deorbit. That would be a commercial contract. It is a commercial contract with SpaceX. So And there are, of course, there are proposals for private space stations uh, to be used in the future. But I mean, the first thing is that, some people argue that the International Space Station is the largest arms control that humanity has ever seen, because when the Soviet Union melted down, and then there was this idea morphed that we should include the former Soviet Union, Russia, in to building the space station, so that their scientists and engineers don't get involved with Iran, don't get involved with North Korea, as a way to try to get them to do something more constructive. And that may be another argument to keep the space station as a kind of a cultural artifact to remember that. But it also grew beyond all comprehension in budgets and time.
Right.
And I think that could somebody build a space station for a lot less, or could we have built the original ISS for a lot less? Certainly. But then it became all about foreign policy, and when it comes about foreign policy or arms control, also if you put that in the context of the Marshall Plan, which was a type of arms control, it's way more expensive. If you look at current year dollars, way more expensive than the Marshall Plan. So it's an extraordinary amount of money, and it is sad. I mean, and one of the criticisms is that running space station, and back in the day, shuttle, basically got the entire U.S. space program stuck in low Earth orbit. So the question is, how do you unstick that, and how do you get us onto the more important goal, which is a multiplanetary species? And I think that's what's missing from the debate about from NASA and space vision.
How does the Institute collaborate with global organizations kind of along those lines, global organizations or maybe even smaller nations that are just getting involved in space commerce?
Yeah, so the first thing is that all of the research that we've done is available for free online to any person, any country that comes on board. We've been involved, either the principals of the Institute of Space Commerce or the Institute itself, with pioneering open source model law, open source legal frameworks. So, for example, one of our initiatives was called Satellite Connect, and was really this framework to accelerate the adoption of satellite globally. And even and going back to your Starlink example, there are countries around the world that ban Starlink, and and a lot of that is just shameless trade, or in a case like Iran, they just don't want their young population to have real access to real media outside of the planet. But oftentimes it's for commercial purposes, as equally as it is for political purposes. So all that information is available on how countries can kind of design more kind of open source citizen science. I mean, this is the exciting thing at this moment in history. You don't have to be kind of NASA and spend some percentage of GDP on a space program. If you're a small country in Africa, Latin America, Asia, you have the resources where you can launch a CubeSat within the next 18 months. You could, and that's
Right.
that's $50,000 to $100,000, and so every country on the planet has the resources where they can play in that game. And we're happy to coach anybody who needs the encouragement, and a lot of times it's also about connecting people. So like if someone wants to launch a CubeSat, we know many folks who have done that, and we have access to vacuum chambers, and we've got access to the vibration tables and all the things that you need to do a CubeSat. Also trying to make sure the science is relevant. Like you don't want to just keep these guys busy for busy work. Like if you're going to do something, make sure it's innovative.
It brings to mind Gilmore Space, which had its first launch attempt just recently. They didn't make it very far, but yet here's a small company in Australia is a big country, but it's a smaller population, and they're working on trying to get something for themselves in the space industry, and it's a commercial enterprise. It's not a government enterprise.
Yeah, and I think the only limitation, I think, is really the mind, because whatever people's limitation in terms of creativity and their thinking, because any country today can do it. And again, you reach a lot of people, and that's a great thing about a podcast. if people want to have a discussion about how their country can start a space program and do it, on a modest budget, we're happy to walk them through it.
In the intro, I talked about space cafe events. Describe one of those to me, and how do those create community across academia, business, and the technology sector?
Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about the Space Cafe platform is that it was kind of a very democratized and organic sort of approach. And so we had one group that started up in Belgium, another group that started up in Japan. We had another group that started up in Tel Aviv in Israel. We've had one in Washington, D.C. And so the hope and desire is that we become slightly more coherent and slightly more kind of quasi-centralized. But and again, if a country says, "Hey, we want to have a space program," they can also create a space cafe. We have a manual. How do you set up a space cafe? And which is exactly what you're talking about, which is creating community and creating mentors and curating people. The other thing that we've done, and you mentioned in the intro, is that we provide scholarships. So one of the both scholarships are related to the International Space University. Every year for the last 37 years, they've been holding a space summer program. This year it's in Korea. It's been held in Brazil. It's been held in Portugal, Canada, held through in countries around the world. We provide scholarships for talented women in India, the Dr. Kalpana Chawla Scholarship Project, to honor Dr. KC, who was sadly killed in the Columbia accident, the Space Shuttle Columbia. And so for 15 years, we've been sending women postgraduate student of talent to the International Space University. We have one of the talented student scholars there currently. So if you think about 750 million women in India, we're just most interested in the very most talented, most passionate women about science, technology, and space. We also provide another astronaut who was sadly killed in the Columbia accident was Israel's first astronaut, Ilan Ramon. And we have the Ilan Ramon Scholarship Project. And we have about 6 or 7 scholars today in Korea as we speak. And just fantastic young people of extraordinary talent. And we've had Arab, we've had women, we've had Jewish scholars. And it's just a fantastic way where some of these smaller countries are on the world platform of the International Space University, and they have all the colleagues. And so in the future, when they say, "Hey, we're looking for a launch," or "We're looking for somebody who's launched CubeSats before," or "We're looking for business investment related," the Ilan Ramon scholars as a group have raised over $300 million in the last 20 years. So they've gone through the program, they've started their own businesses. So it's including one of the scholars who created Space IL, which landed the first non-governmental lander on the moon. Sadly, it was what they call a hard landing, but they were successful and they did get there. So, we've seen some fantastic scholars. It's been a great experience for everybody.
There are so many things that we could talk about, Michael, and I want to touch on just a couple more. One of those has been a really big topic of discussion, and that's space debris and orbital resource management. How does the Institute of Space Commerce address those challenges?
Well, there are a number of kind of dedicated institutes and universities that are very focused on it. We were involved with looking at some solutions for the World Economic Forum. They did some work in this area. One of the ideas is really trying to figure out how you can incentivize launching parties to minimize space debris. One is, how do you keep track of it? And, one of the questions is, can you blockchain that debris? And is there a way to incentivize people, not to create debris in the first place, but also can you have creative commercial mechanisms that can incentivize the cleanup of that space debris. So it's a huge problem, and we really look forward to businesses, entrepreneurs coming up with business ideas to creatively solve this. Obviously, the regulation's part of it, but the big part of it is going to be the business solutions part of it.
So what's next for the Institute? Do you have any upcoming initiatives, expansions, policy proposals? What have you kind of got on the drawing board?
Well, I mean, great question. I think we're going to stick with, pushing the humanities of multiplanetary species. We want to continue with expanding the debate on business, commerce, and economics. We talked a little bit about some of the concerns that we have with Europe, and there's some challenges in the United States, which is, how do you accelerate some of the good work that's being done by SpaceX and others on the commercial side? But the Save Our Station, I think, is an important one. We really would like to expand the debate on that. And then, we have a cadre of fellows and others that are involved with the Institute and really trying to get their work out on the platform and expanding the debate, getting people excited, engaging audiences. And, I think we're doing that. And, from our point of view, we just want to see kind of year-to-year growth and kind of engagement, debate, getting people excited, but also having kind of real solutions ready to go. So when people are confused, governments are confused, policymakers are confused, we can help step in and provide some context to that.
And finally, how can people find you and how can they get involved?
Yeah, so if people go to change.space, that's where the Institute site is located. You can reach out to the contact on that website, or feel free to reach out to some of the main founders, Kevin O'Connell, Michael Potter on LinkedIn, Chris Stott on LinkedIn, just whatever's the easiest way, and we're happy to field it. And there's always room, it's a very inclusive institute. So if there's people with compelling, challenging ideas that need to be talked about, we want to widen the debate.
All right. Well, I hope folks will be getting in touch with you, Michael. I really appreciate your time.
And thanks for all the good work that you guys do with the Journal of Space Commerce. Thanks for all the good work on the podcast. You guys are pros. You've been doing it, and you got a great following. And just appreciate the opportunity to join you.
Well, it's my pleasure. So thank you so much. Michael Potter is one of the co-founders of the Institute of Space Commerce. That's going to do it for this edition of the Journal of Space Commerce podcast, a production of Xterra Media. The executive producers are Mike Turner and Tom Patton, with production assistance from Debbie Turner. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our podcasts or any of our other videos. You can get daily updates on space commerce by subscribing to the Journal of Space Commerce on Substack at www.xterrajsc.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on X at XterraJSC. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional, an investor, or enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit XterraJSC.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and, when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.
I wanna go faster, faster. Hands in the air, we're gonna crash. Searching for the answers. My Galileo, the through is looking glass. Thirst for reason. Our dreamer's eyes we gaze into. A sense of purpose, know my view.